This episode of Distraction is sponsored by Landmark College, offering comprehensive support for students with learning disabilities, ADHD, and ASD. Learn more at lcdistraction.org. Landmark College, we teach differently. Hello, this is Dr. Ned Hallowell with an episode of Distraction. We're back for our fall season, and I'm very thrilled to be with you once again. I want to open today's episode by setting a scene. So I'm sitting in our living room yesterday with my 26-year-old son, Jack, and my 23-year-old son, Tucker. And it's at a juncture in the Patriots-Texans game. Now, if you don't know it, we are avid football fans, pro football fans. As we were watching the game, and it was at a critical juncture in the game, the two of them were also picking their fantasy team for an upcoming series of games, and they were on DraftKings on the app while they were watching this critical part of the Patriots game. And I said to them very annoyedly, can't we just watch the Patriots game and get into that? Why do you have to be also doing this stupid fantasy thing? And Tucker looked at me and said, Dad, you are so old. Don't you know anything about multitasking? This is what we can do that you can't do. And I thought to myself, holy moly, here I am, supposedly one of the world's experts on attention deficit disorder, which is all about multitasking. And I've written at great length about multitasking, but I've mostly written about the dangers of it, and that it is neurologically impossible to focus simultaneously on two cognitively demanding tasks. You can. What you're doing when you say you're multitasking is you're switching your attention back and forth rapidly from one task to another. So what they were doing is they were switching back and forth rapidly from the Patriots game to picking their fantasy selections, and if neither focus is particularly demanding, you can get away with it. In fact, it can make both more interesting. But if one were a lecture on nuclear physics and the other was a reading of a Shakespearean sonnet, you couldn't do it because both would be too cognitively demanding, and you'd miss important stuff. So at some point, multitasking does break down, and that's basically what I've been writing about. Avoiding the dangers of multitasking rather than celebrating the delights. And my boys were trying to instruct me on celebrating the delights, which is what they were doing while they were watching the TV. They were certainly aware of what was going on in the Patriots game, but they were also enjoying picking their fantasy team. And why did I have to be such an old fogey saying, no, you should pay full attention to the Patriots game? I mean, let's face it, it's entertainment. I thought to myself, I've got to start coming out of this sort of reactive position, and I thought of a quotation from Sophocles, who said the secret of change is focusing all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And I think we're fighting the change that is just obviously happening. We're fighting what's going on. We're fighting. I've been reading about Fortnite and the internet addictions, and my producer fed me some headlines of a hockey player who didn't get drafted by the NHL because of an internet addiction, and you can read in papers all the time of people getting divorced or fired because of overuse of the internet, and there are indeed internet addiction treatment centers in South Korea. There's like 6 or 7 of them. But this is all focusing on the downside. It's all about internet addiction, people not talking to each other. How many times have you had conversations with people shaking their heads? And it's usually people over the age of let's say 40, just saying, oh, I don't know what this generation is coming to. Conversation is disappearing. It's all going to hell in a handbasket. And, I'm reminded when trains first came in, people were predicting brain damage due to the jostling that you'd feel as you were riding along in a train. And when telephones first came in, there was all this prediction about the radiation that would contaminate your brain through the telephone. And I think we're overreacting to the dangers of these video games and their addictive potential and the many books that are out about them. And believe me, I've been part of this. I've talked about the modern paradox of electronic overconnection and interpersonal disconnection. But I think we may be being a bit of, the old fogey and shaking our heads the way people shook their heads at us when, in fact, we were tearing down some things that needed to be torn down. Like, I don't think video games have anything to do with righteous reform, but I do think they have to do with how we deploy attention. And I think it's much more complicated than just pay attention to one thing, and that's the best way to do it. And the fact of the matter is, neuroscience has not figured out at all what's the best way to deploy your attention. It depends upon what you're doing. And what's the best way to have an intimate conversation? You tell me. Is it best to stare into your lover's eyes as if she or he were a statue? Isn't there a lot to be gained in those distracted moments when you surprise someone? Aren't discoveries often made when you're not paying the least bit of attention and an idea just comes up from behind and you suddenly see it? David Neilman told me that's how he discovered the electronic ticket. It just came to him out of nowhere. It's said that's how Kekulé discovered the benzene ring. He was smoking a pipe and he saw the smoke swallow its end like a snake. Now that may be a myth, but it is true that new ideas often come when you're in a completely unfocused state. So this notion of paying rapt attention is how we're most productive. That in fact we may do our best when we find a kind of intermittent focus, a kind of pitter-patter of focus like raindrops on a tin roof, that it creates its own sort of symphony, its own kind of musicality, that it comes and it goes, and it's there and it's not there, and we find our own. I know when I'm writing, that's what it's like. I'm there and I'm not there. I'm there and then I look away and it comes and it doesn't come. And maybe that's sort of like my boys watching the Patriots game yesterday, switching back and forth between their fantasy league and tuning into the Pats. Not to mention having time to tell me off when I said, why don't you pay attention? Tucker tells me, Dad, why don't you get with it and understand the virtues of multitasking? I think I want to invite you all to rethink all the hand-wringing we go through about how bad these things are. And in fact, let's look at the possibilities they open up. I had an adult patient who's an entrepreneur in my office just the other day who said the banquet that the internet gives me, he's a very ADD entrepreneur who has 7 or 8 businesses going all the time, talk about multitasking. That's what he does all day. And he said, I couldn't possibly do it without multitasking, without the internet. And so it's a matter of, can you do it without giving anything up? It's not like drunk driving where you think you can and you demonstrably can't. It's more like a special sort of skill that some people can develop at a very high level. So this mini is by way of thanking my 2 sons for getting me to take a new look at a problem that I thought I had solved so elegantly, and invite you all to take a new look at it with me. This is Dr. Ned Hallowell for Distraction. If you have a question for me or a show idea for us, email it to connect@distractionpodcast.com. Or better yet, call us and leave a voicemail. Call 844-55-CONNECT and leave us a message. We really look forward to hearing from you. We need to hear from you. We look forward to hearing from you. We want to hear from you. So 844-55-CONNECT or email at connect@distractionpodcast.com. Distraction is produced by Collisions, the podcast division of CRN International. Collisions, podcasts for curious people. Our sound engineers and editors are the wonderfully talented Pat Keogh and Chris Latham, and our producer is the multi-talented and unbelievably brilliant Sarah Curtin.